What up? It's your boy, Dick Incredible Man. And yes, I am back at it again. And this is 911 Season 4, Episode 7. And the general consensus is Neighbors be crazy, man. Let's talk about it. This episode took a lot of twists and turns, and there was a lot of emotion yet again, and I felt really good to have that back. Last week was something else, but like, it wasn't like the 911 we know and love. It was a good episode, and there were some funny moments, but it wasn't the 911 that we came to know and love. In this week's episode, it brought that back. It brought back the emotion, the hint of comedy, and just the feels all the way around, dealing with some stuff throughout the entire episode. Every case that took place this episode was pretty much revolving around neighbor-esque, except for that very first one. Maybe because, but like, they had sold a bad weed like to a bunch of the neighbors. So I guess you could say every case pretty much had taken place with neighbors throughout this entire episode, and that was the whole general theme of this episode. That first case was crazy though, man. Like, these women, they were rocking out at first though. Like, I gotta give them credit. They were doing their thing, but then like they got a hold of some weed that had rat poison in it, and they started bleeding from their eyes, and they were still high, but like they were bleeding from their eyes, and oh my gosh, these chicks were gone, man. But we see that this episode really touched on a lot of stuff, but we also got introduced to Hen's mother. We've never really dealt with Hen's family. We've seen her backstory of how she became a paramedic. We see her meeting her wife and stuff, and dealing with her ex and Denny's real mother. Like, we've seen a lot of stuff going on with Hen, but we never really got introduced to her mother. And this episode we did, and we kind of see where their strained relationship kind of comes from. And yet again, it's that whole thing of miscommunication. And it's so sad because miscommunication seems to be the trend in a lot of stuff that's going on. Why are my colors changing? Hold on. Okay. I think we're back. Okay. Miscommunication seems to be the trend in a lot of stuff that's going on with 911. It's just nobody wants to talk about it, so it gets left out, and then things get miscommunicated, and that's where lies the problem. And we see that also happens with Hen and her mother. In the entire episode, we see that Hen's a little weary of her mother coming back into town and popping up all of a sudden, and they have some history going on, and we're kind of wondering why. And then boom bam, we see Hen finally hearing her mother talk about her becoming a doctor, but Hen didn't stay and really just understand what was going on. She heard that part, and that's the sad thing. Like, when you eavesdrop, you always hear something you don't want to hear, but if you stick around, you might hear something that you want to hear. It's just eavesdropping. It's a fickle thing. It's a very fickle thing. But we see that at the end of the episode, we see that Hen's mother came back because she's been living out of her car because of the pandemic. She's broke, she's homeless, and she's been living in her car, but she didn't want her daughter to see her like that. And Hen thought she was always riding her case, but she was always just a little envious of Hen because Hen always, whatever she went after, she got it. She wouldn't stop till she got it. And her mother never had that go-getter energy, if you will. And she was a little envious of Hen, and she didn't want Hen to see her in the position that she was in. And to have that whole reconcile moment between these two characters was such a nice thing. For Hen and for her mother herself. And then at the end of the episode, we see her moving her mother inside her house. So it was a nice resolution, but we see that they had to work through some things, and then they just sat there and had a nice conversation, the communication part, and they worked through some things that they were going through. And at the end of the episode, it was quite wonderfully resolved. Now, one of the things that had me wild in this entire episode was Buck and the whole thing with his neighbor. Now, from point blank, I knew the moment that he came home and told Albert about her, and she just so happens to end up living next door. I knew in that moment that this chick and Albert were going to end up together. I just knew it. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this stuff out. I mean, it just was mechanics, man. He always had Albert kind of intervening so he would never kind of bump into this chick. And I just knew that's the way that it was going to go. And I feel like that's a good thing because now she kind of looks at Buck in a different light, I guess. But I'm going to be 100%. This chick had a weird energy or whatever you want to call it about her from point blank on this date at the very beginning. She just had a stick up her butt the entire time. She didn't want to hear anything Buck was saying. Admittedly, Buck shouldn't have started the date off with the incident with the chick stuck in the window trying to throw out the poop and then funking up the bathroom and putting the water in the plunger. Like that's the wrong kind of story to tell. You could have told her a multitude of other stories. The stuff about the tsunami, the pipe. Like there's but the Hollywood story that happened this season. Buck, there was so many other stories you could have told her. You did not have to tell her the poop story. That's the story you stick to tell her. And we see that Buck is trying to be a new better person with him going to therapy and everything. And this chick wasn't having none of it. Maybe she just didn't really want to be on a date, or maybe she just didn't like Buck. And that was like the worst date. It was hard for me to even watch. Like this is bad, man. I left maybe like 15, 20 minutes into the date if that's how her attitude was going to be the entire time. I'd be respectable and I'd be a gentleman, but at the same time, like this chick, she didn't even want to hear it. She didn't want to hear nothing, and she just kept, oh, you're trying to do this, and oh, you telling me that we need to share. You're trying to mansplain. Come on, man. She didn't even want to hear Buck out in the least. But the moment that like he told Albert to kind of intervene for him, I knew that that's how the entire thing was going to go. But at the end of the episode, we see Buck trying to reconcile with her a little bit after dealing with everything he's dealt with her and learned some things. And they end up reconciling, and she's like, thank you, because if I wouldn't have had this horrible date, I wouldn't have been introduced to this wonderful person known as Albert. I don't see that going nowhere. Albert, definitely, dated for a little while, but it's Albert, man. Come on, man. We know Albert. Albert's not that kind of guy. He's not going to stay with this chick forever. But it was nice to have that moment, and Buck's looking like, I can't believe you, Albert. I just can't believe you. It was funny to see Albert in that situation. Like, hey, babe, you're out of shampoo, huh? Oh, hey, Buck. But now let's talk about my favorite moment about this episode. Now, last week's preview kind of teased me and messed me up a little bit because they had me seeing Michael get knocked out thinking he's on the phone with May, and that wasn't the case at all. That was two complete different scenes entirely. But I will say that I love the fact that Michael got to solve a crime this episode with Bobby. Oh my gosh. Now, this episode was legit, man. Like, these guys going up playing amateur detectives, but it was a real situation, man, because with Michael, being out of work and kind of going a little stir crazy because of the pandemic, he's stuck at home. He doesn't have anything to do. Harry doesn't really need him anymore. May's kind of doing her own thing. And, his boyfriend's at work, working all the time. Like, Michael doesn't have anything to do. But he can become one of those neighbors that spy on people. And I feel like that's one of those things that always end up going wrong, man. Like, that's one of the things, like, you do whatever you want to do, but I feel like it's one of those things that kind of like backfires, and that definitely happened this episode. But at the end of the day, they also saved this lady that was in there being operated on by this butcher of a doctor. But spying on people, it always kind of backfires a little bit. But we get to see Bobby and Michael and their whole ragtag group out here playing amateur detectives, and they were doing their thing, man. They searched the trash can until Michael actually decided to really literally break the law by breaking into this man's apartment, and then he get hits across the head. Now, the sad thing is that he shouldn't have broken into the apartment, but it's a good thing that he did, because if he hadn't, that lady probably would have died if Michael didn't break inside the apartment. So I guess you could say all's well that ends well, but he still broke the law. And, Athena made that known that, you guys need to stop this. You need to find something else to do. And it was nice to see Michael in that perspective, I guess, because we've kind of been shirking Michael a little bit this season. I know the season just really started, but like, we haven't really seen Michael that much this season, and I would love to see more of him, especially since he's doing better. Like, with him being sick, we got to see him going through some trials and tribulations, but he's doing a little better, so let's see more of him. I would love to see more of Michael. Well, following along with the trend of neighbors, we also have the one neighbor with the old guy and the dude building the boat for his kids. First of all, the man was so skeptical about 3 inches for one. Was it 3 inches or 3 feet? I think it was 3 feet. But now, when the Humvee started to fall, the dude that was building the boat saw it. The black dude saw it. He looked up. He was like, "Hey, man, you should run." Okay, dude, you see that something's falling and he's telling you to run. Why not just run back there with him instead of trying to go forward? This dude ran forward and he conked his head and then the Humvee just fell on him. Oh my gosh. But like overall, it was a nice episode, man. There was some elements in this episode that I really enjoyed, which is Hen and her mother's whole situation. Michael and Bobby yet again getting closer to each other and solving a crime. And the whole general theme of neighbors, because we also have Chimney and Maddie kind of here making gift baskets for their neighbors because they're going to have a baby on the way, and that's definitely going to bother their neighbors with the wah, wah, wah. So they tried to make a gift basket to try to ease their neighbors into the situation of them having a baby, and sorry if we're going to keep you awake a lot of nights. So, you know, it leads to a lot of stuff, but overall it was a very nice episode, and we got back to what makes 911 911. This is your boy Dick Incredible, man. Don't forget to smash the like button till you can't smash it anymore. Comment down below and I'll be sure to respond to each and every one of them, and subscribe, but only if you really want to, man. Peace out. I cannot complain because today I'm doing